5, 6, 7, 8.
So hi guys, thank you for clicking the video. This is Trolling Wise Minds and I'm Kanishk. Today we have a special guest with us. His name is Mr. Divyansh Mathur. He's the founder of Eden Smart Homes, IoT based startup. I'll not probably get into explaining the startup. So he graduated from IIT Delhi last year and he's with us today. He'll be explaining about his brand and we'll be talking about a few more things on the side. Let's welcome him on the podcast. Hello Mr. Divyansh, how are you?
Yeah, just call me Divyansh. It's fine. So hi Kanishk, how are you?
Hello, I'm fine sir.
Yeah. So a little bit background about myself and what my company does. So I graduated last year from IIT Delhi. I am from Jumri Jalaya. It's a small city in Jharkhand. And right from the start of college, I was very interested about entrepreneurship. It started off with a small college project by the name Inactus, where I was part of a couple of projects. One of them being in the field of menstrual hygiene space, and the other one was we developed a alternative fuel based out of cow dung, right? That can be used for the purpose of cremation. So that is where it started. Then gradually I developed. I went on to do an internship at IIT Ahmedabad, where I was really introduced to the idea of entrepreneurship and startups. So that is where I came across this book, The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, and it kind of changed the entire perspective about entrepreneurship and doing startups for me. And I came back from there, started Academies, which was a web-based platform that helped industry professionals connect with academic institutions. And then going forward, I came on board Eden Smart Homes, which is a where we help devices go online, right? What I mean by that is that all these electrical appliances that you see in your homes and corporate offices, right? So they are dumb in a way, right? So what we do is that with the help of IoT, we take them to an internet layer where they become smart, and then you can do a whole host of things with these appliances, right? So on a typical corporate office, you'll see that a lot of power wastage happens. So the chowkidar comes in at 7 a.m. in the morning, and the actual professionals, they come in at 10 a.m., right? So there is absolute 3 hours of electricity wastage, and then your AC, it's all oftentimes not optimized to perform at a certain temperature. So all of these leads to a lot of power wastage. So our technology help these corporate clients save costs and on electricity bills. And yeah, that's about my venture and about me.
Sure, sir. So as you mentioned, you went to IIM Ahmedabad and etc. So initially my first question was, how did you enter this whole thing? So you already explained in the introduction itself. So you wasted one of my questions. That's like super bad. But so anyways, I'll just it increased the question inside me. You're from IIT, you went to IIM, all the big brands. So do you think the circuit these colleges provide help you in a certain manner to like build brands, and it makes things way easier, or else it's like it's way too difficult for a guy who just knows coding and stuff, right? Who knows how to code a website to start an organization of its own. So do you think the colleges provide the necessary amount of nurture to you to build up a brand or something like that? So yeah, if you understand my questions, if it's not insane enough, so yeah.
So yeah, I do agree with that. Like having an ecosystem of the like-minded people that you find at IIT Delhi and at certain other IITs. So that certainly helps. And then you have this alumni base who have been there, done that, right? So that certainly helps you. And yeah, but that is only up to a certain extent, right? So that can give you a good head start. But going forward, it's only up to you how can you take it forward, right? So I think this will give you an edge to start off with, but yeah, going forward, it ultimately boils down to how you take your venture forward.
Sure, sir. So I'm sure since you're from IIT and a lot of people like the primary convention to get into these colleges right from when you start preparing in class 11 is to get a job, right? To get a like 20 lakh, 25 lakh, whatever. So and I like regularly see people from IIT Delhi, the last year pass outs like posting on LinkedIn like okay, I got this, I got into that. So how difficult is that to leave that complete notion to like I'll not set for placements, I'll like quit sitting for that high profile jobs or whatever, and I'll start my own organization, an idea which only till now, I have the validation for. And that brings me to one of my next questions. How much validation do you need for the? You think idea is good, and how do you assess it? Because you're like in college, so you have a very reserved ecosystem. So you have your constraints, and you haven't tested out in real world. So how do you become so sure about an organization and an idea that it will work out in the real world as well? And so I'm leaving a 20 or 25 LP, whatever. I'm leaving a high paying job. So yeah, how does that mindset functions? Could you just walk us through that?
Okay, so for your first question, it definitely is very difficult. So as they say, IIT gives you this safety net, right? That you can always fall back on, and you will still end up finding a good job and stuff like that. But there is also a flip side to it, wherein since you are sure that even if this doesn't work, you'll get a good paying job. It kind of hinders you in a way that you never really test the bottom, right? Because I'll tell you what happens. So in this pursuit of entrepreneurship, right, it's a very it's a journey filled with a lot of ups and downs, right? And there will be several occasions wherein you will see things not working out, things not being in your favor and stuff like that. And ultimately there is one point, if you had not been from IIT Delhi, right, or any other IIT or IIM, so it would be like the end of the world for you, right? And then since you hit the rock bottom, and then you keep on trying because there is no alternate path for you, right? But on the other side, if you happen to be from these IIT IIM space, so I've seen a lot of people who jumped into entrepreneurship, tried it out for 6 8 months, and they eventually went on to taking a job, right? Because they had that ecosystem set for them that they can always take a job, right? So in a way, this kind of prevents you from taking huge risks as well, because you would have heard many stories where people had to sell their houses to arrange funds, take debt and stuff like that. So that is not typically the case that happens with if you have that safety net in place. So it's a good thing to have it, because at the end of the day you are sure that things cannot go very bad, but it also in a way prevents you from taking huge risks. So yeah, that is the question answer to your first question. So, and coming to the second part of your question, so you can never be really sure that this idea will work, and there is no fixed answer to this question that you can always be sure. Because ultimately, if there was some method to prove it that this idea will definitely work, then everyone would be doing that, right? So it's more like it's a hidden trial process. Yes, there is definitely some science to entrepreneurship that can be learned, and books like Lean Startup definitely help in that, because you have a set structure of things that you need to follow, right? The build, measure, learn feedback loop. Like this is the one of the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs and startups do, that they build products that nobody wants, right? That is one of the biggest mistakes. So there are certain things that you can definitely avoid, and but yeah, it's only up to a certain extent. Apart from that, you need to go there, test your hypothesis, and build products around that and keep iterating. That's the only way. You can never be 100% sure that this is something I need to do and this is what the world needs. You will never come to that conclusion ever.
So sure, sir. But so that brings me to my next question. Since we are talking about how does like these financial, everything we talked about is related to finance, right? You have this financial safety net. This safety net we're talking about is financial in nature, right? We always have a job and everything. So now the question is why do you need a safety net? It's like it's insane enough, but I'll explain it to the one deeper level. The general trend of every great startup in the world has been philanthropic in nature. You have to provide for something, you have to give back to the communities, whatever you've learned. So giving back to the community, and it's a whole different paradigm of thinking and starting up. And the current Bollywood, or maybe Hollywood, I'll say art, the startup phase and startup art ecosystem has brought this current notion, has originated this current notion that startups is all about materialistic growth and earning money, and buying a big mansion and raising like 100 million turnover. So do you think these startups and these ventures, which are materialistically driven at the very inception of them, are most likely to fail because they don't have that drive to go through the rock bottom times? Or maybe you think that the ones with the ones which are philanthropic in nature tend to drive through because they are meant to give back, and so yeah, if you understand my question, what's the point about that?
Sure. So I'll probably give you a reality check here. Like this sounds very like people romanticize on this, that you want to give back to the society, and it's philanthropic in nature, which is true to a certain extent. But you have to understand eventually that like especially for students who are starting out, and let's talk about from my personal experience, or the kind of people who start straight out of college, right? So if you look at it, most of the people who come to IIT, they're from typical middle class backgrounds, right? And they end up having sometimes loans as well, right? So that is the starting point. So the first thing is you need to take a risk, because see, the societal convention is that once you get into IIT, and you're doing well, you're doing decent enough there as well, then you can definitely end up having a good job and pay back and stuff like that. So on the other part, that coming on to the philanthropic aspect of it, that is good. But once you are starting out, see, eventually the purpose of a business is to
Make money, of
solve
course.
problems. Yes, make money. Money would be, I would say, it would be a
Like
byproduct of it.
that's the product of a company, right? To make money and pay the bills. And but when you're starting, it's
Mhm.
all about an idea and make a good product. So my question wasn't think they should or should not think about finances. They absolutely have to think
Mhm.
about finances. My question
Mhm.
was how likely is it for a guy who has that safety net, or who solely started about like those materialistic and financial stuff. So how
Mhm.
most like is he most likely to quit? Sorry, I'll take that again. Is he most likely to quit when there are tough times, and when he has like certain other options and he's not very certain about his idea working out? Or a guy who start on like solely based on the basis of philanthropy and maybe giving back to the community? So is there a chance, is there a difference of mind of the schools of thought? So that was my question. There was nothing related to finances, etc. Yeah.
Okay. I'll take that. So see, what I believe and what I've heard is that there is a small difference between an entrepreneur and a businessman, right? So for an entrepreneur, it starts off with solving a problem, right? And for a businessman, they are in the business of making money. So their main focus would be to generate wealth for their shareholders, right? Whoever are there in the company. So when we talk about the entrepreneurship ecosystem, it definitely starts off with solving a problem. Because see, at the end of the day, if things go south or nothing is working, right, what will eventually stand is that problem, because that is still there to be solved, right? This would not be in the case of a businessman. So ultimately, it boils down to you as an individual, what kind of company you are trying to build, right? Are you an entrepreneur or are you a businessman? And I think both of them is absolutely fine. If you want to start it off with the mindset that I want to make money, I want to build a great company and have an exit or get it IPO listed and stuff like that, so definitely that is one aspect of it. And then you'd see some people who are so obsessed about solving these problems that they would just not give up, right? So if in one venture they're not successful enough, they'll probably take the second one and the third one, and it keeps going on and on. So it ultimately boils down to you as an individual, how do you want to take it forward? And I think both of them is right. Nothing is wrong, because ultimately you are the one to decide for yourself. Yeah.
It's probably connected on how much you've connected with the problem, or
Yes.
maybe
Yes.
the way to solve it. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. But that brings me to another question of mine. The current trend is going north. If I talk about technology and stuff, so there's a lot of automation coming into play, right? Things like IoT, blockchain, and the current startups of your startup as well is like based not if I'll not say purely, but majorly based on IoT, right? So
Mhm.
the tech is coming into play, and lots of processes are being automated, and the middlemen are being cut. And it's a discussion. It's a relevant discussion that many people are losing their jobs because of the automation and automation of certain processes. And I saw this post by Kalpit Virwal, this guy from Bombay. He told that in 10 to 12 years, software development jobs would tend to like vanish and get automated and stuff. I'll not get into the debate, is it happening or not, because I'm not no expert in that. But I'll probably ask you, what's your take on automation? How do you think it's changing the world, and how do you think we as individuals should be prepared for it? Because it is possible that mono skills culture might get obsolete, and having single skill might not be the right way to go in the next decade. So what do you think about this? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we need to look this in time frames, right? So if you talk about the next 20 to 30 years, automation is not going to hamper in any way. Like it will only enable people to perform activities better and be more productive at what they do, right? But if you look at larger time scales, let's talk about 60, 70 or 100 years from now, right? That is when I believe in, I came across this book by Yuval Noah Harari, where he talks about
Sapiens.
Sapiens, and then 21 lessons from the 21st
Yes.
century. So there he talks about a lot of crazy ideas, but if you look at it, all of that is happening right here, right? And then going forward, it is only going to manifest in all the very weird ways, right? So in the next 20 to 30 years, like people were scared about the industrial revolution as well, like that it will take away the jobs and stuff like that. But ultimately what it did is that it increased your productivity, right? And it enabled people to perform their activities better. And I think automation and IoT is only going to help it at this point of time, because if you look at it, what kind of activities you can do with IoT. So with the adoption of electric vehicles, IoT is going to help that in a big way, right? Now you would want to have these chargers installed at various places, and you'll want to have the data what they are broadcasting, what kind of chargers are there, what's their runtime, and all of that will only be enabled via IoT. And then some of the manual activities, like security personnel opening gates. So a lot of application of IoT can be seen in parking lots, right? And then with the advent of this home automation system, it's a little new for India. It has been adopted very well in the US, but with it becoming more popular, this will only help you. Like every day you have to wake up at 7 a.m. Turn your geyser, and then you might at times leave it turned on, right? So it is helping you there that you can schedule it, and after 15 or 20 minutes it will turn off. And similar is the case in corporate offices or in the hospitality segment with oils, etc. And even in fact hydroponics is becoming very popular, and it is giving you good productivity yield. So that is also something that's finding a good application of IoT. So these technologies in the short run will definitely not take away the jobs or make people redundant. But going forward, once all of this can be automated, he's right when he says that software will be automated, and most of these jobs which are redundant in nature, they will be automated. So it might happen that in a 50-year or a 60-year time scale, these jobs become redundant, and you might find, as you mentioned in the book, that you might find a lot of useless individuals, right? Who would be just good for nothing. Hence it becomes very important, give kind of upskilling that is required to people at this point of time, so that they can match up with the ultra humans or superhumans who would be coming in the next generation or so. So yeah, I think in the short time frame, it's not going to have much of an impact.
Also, he mentions that this thing you talked about, the industrial revolution happened like two centuries back, and after that, these it was very delicate in nature. That these these timestamps in history which make people upskill themselves and these things happen. The frequency of them has gradually evolved, and so yeah, I guess that's the way to look at it. And also, it's a mere coincidence. I've asked like 7 people about this thing, automation, and everyone has someone the other way quoted Sapiens in their answers. So I don't know if Yuval Noah Harari and my podcast is in some rivalry, but I don't know. So okay, fine. I'll move on to my next question. So this takes me back to this takes me to my next question, which is like back in 2000, there was a dot-com culture prevailing. Any people were looking for new ideas and just putting them online and starting with their startups, and that results in many of the big corporations we have, like Amazon is an example, and many other things have an example. They're mere people putting business online and then upscaling them to a certain level with a clear strategy, and it happens to be a big organization. But I guess now the paradigm is shifting a bit, because the current target of the entrepreneurs is not to come up with new ideas and new organizations, because it's like it's very expensive to have an organization. It takes a lot of time. So do you think this is a nice trend? People are like taking a particular department from an organization, like optimizing a certain process, a certain supply chain. So do you think, like we were discussing this code, I just forgot to mention it, and it's a disclaimer that we Googled this before the podcast, that it's a code by Henry Ford that I again forgot it. I have to read it again. if I ask people what they want, they will ask for a better horse. So do you think the current market is currently consumer based, solely consumer based? So we have to look for innovations, and we cannot be trusting on what the consumer paradigms are moving towards. So is it what entrepreneurs might be looking at? So what's your take on that?
Okay. So I think there are both aspects to this debate. That on one hand of it, you'll have that you should not ask your customers that what they want, because they can only think to a certain extent, which is right, as Henry Ford mentioned, that because that is where the society as a whole have the idea about, right? Like they cannot think about 50, 60, 70 years from now, right? So something like what we had talked about sapiens, right? So, and you cannot expect an average individual to think about what will be happening 70, 80 years from now. So these are the ideas you get from open thinkers who have been in this space, who have seen the evolution of humankind, who have studied a lot in that domain. So that's absolutely right, that you should not ask your customers what they want. Eventually that they'll only think to a certain extent, and you will not be able to make a quantum jump in terms of the technology that you are offering, right? But also there is a second aspect to it, that you'll often hear people, even before building the product, ask your customers, will they really want it or not, right? I think both of these arguments are valid, right? And it is about finding a right balance between the two. So on one side of the spectrum, you'll find people telling you, don't ask your customers what they need. I think you as an entrepreneur need to figure it out for them, right? On the other side of the spectrum, you'll find people who would say, first ask your customers, get their feedback on what you are trying to build, and see if it is a real problem that needs to be solved, and then go on building the product, which is absolutely right. And this is the basic idea of lean methodology, right? That you should first validate your hypothesis and then go on to building the actual product, and which is absolutely valid. But I think as an entrepreneur, you need to find the right balance, which lies somewhere in the center, right? You cannot be too delusional that I want to build this flying car that will take you from here to Chicago in 20 minutes and stuff like that. So that would be being very delusional. On the other hand, you cannot ask your customers, like which is exactly right, like you cannot ask them, would you need a better Alexa, right? So
Yeah,
they will still, yes,
it's
maybe the Alexa
it's
can
pretty. It's
control the
like
appliance.
it's like something you mentioned in the like another part of this podcast, the same podcast, that you said currently entrepreneurs are doing this wrong, that they're building things nobody needs. So
Mm.
I guess this in some manner justifies and both contradicts the same thing, because we
Correct.
have to build this thing, right? Keep this some nobody needs for now, but they will need in the future. So that's the thing, right? How do you develop that vision? I guess that comes from the content you consume, and how realistic is that content in nature. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
pretty much my
as I
take.
mentioned, so you need to find that balance, right? I think both of the arguments are valid. You should not ask your customers what they want, and you should ask your customers what they want, right? But you need to find a perfect balance. You should not, like, see, I'll give you an example. So one of the very common mistakes that people do when they do market research is they ask people, would you want, if I build this for you, would you like it, right? So there is this concept of uh, like people, if I were to ask you, Kanish, would you go to a gym in future, right? Whenever you ask your customers to predict the future, they will always see themselves in a positive context, right? Like we assume ourselves to be better off in future compared to the present state. So it's always not a good idea to ask customers, would you want this if I build it for you, right? So a good way of doing it is that you should look for patterns in the kind of conversations you have with your customers, right? So that is when you will get an idea of what actual products you need to build. Because see, we as entrepreneurs have a very limited knowledge. Like if you would ask me, should we build a TikTok, I would say no. Like, who will use that, right? Because that is something I would not personally like. Eventually I did started liking it, but we have very narrow views of what people will like. So eventually you have to go and ask for your customers, right? If you would ask me, should we do this podcast in Hindi or English, right? Since both of us can speak English, so it would be good for us to do it in English. But if you look at the actual demographic of India, in order to get this podcast more views, we should have done this in Hindi, so that more people can understand that. So you will only get the perspective of what the customers want when you go and ask them, or when you get a focus group studies and do a good market research. So I think both of these aspects are right. You should know, you should actually ask your customers what you want. There is a good way of doing that. And then on the other hand, once you have gathered all of this data, you should be the one who has that vision that yes, the insights that I have gathered from all these discussions, what should I eventually make out of it, right? So this is how what I believe this should work.
Sure, sir. It's like a lot of ethical discussion about how things should be in this world. But I'll probably drag this podcast now to the most realistic part and the most hot topic about entrepreneurship. That is venture capitalism and VCs.
Mm.
So since we've been we're running a company, and we've been following a lot of these venture capitalism stories and etc. So you being from the real world, explain how venture capitalism works like, and for someone who's starting up, and how does a VC think, and how much have you interpreted of him? So yeah, of somebody who's is planning to start out, how does he should go with the start mind, or please, I'll require you, and I'll request you to keep this in mind, that somebody might or might not need funding in the first place. So how to make that call? So yeah, keeping that in mind, yeah, that's my question.
So I'll probably give you the very ethical aspect of it and the very realistic aspect of it, right? Let's talk about the ethical aspect of it. Why venture capital is very good, and why angel investments, this entire VC culture, this is very helpful for a company to grow and for a country in general to grow. So I'll start off with a very small example, right? So let's say if you want to do, so you see, what we have done as an ecosystem is that we have romanticize the entire idea of entrepreneurship, right? That you need to be a visionary and stuff like that. But if you look at it, 70 to 80% of India are entrepreneurs, right? Everyone, even
Yeah, of course,
a
a confectionery store owner, yeah, everyone.
Yeah, so that is how it has been working since decades, and all of them are entrepreneurs. But what venture capital actually helps you in a way is that it gives you access to capital, which is very important. It gives you the access to networks, right? So if, let's say, today I'm building a product for Oyo rooms, and if I have someone who is a head of Oyo, right? So that will definitely help me expand in a much larger way. Compare this with a vegetable seller. He only has access to a particular territory, right? So one, venture capital helps you with capital, obviously, and then it gives you a good amount of network. Third, it helps you with mentorship, right? Because these are the guys who have been in the ecosystem, and they have seen how to build companies, how to grow companies. And then on the fourth part of it, it also helps you scale companies very rapidly, right? If at all you find a product market fit, that is when you should use venture capital for scaling, right? So now coming to the ethical aspect of it, all of these 4-5 points that I mentioned, this can definitely help any entrepreneur increase their odds of winning, right? So in a way, it is a very good. So just to give you an example, right? If these venture capitalists, they wouldn't have supported a Zomato or Swiggy, right? They wouldn't have been able to burn so much cash and become the kind of brands they have today, right? Or just to take an example of Flipkart, there are flip sides of it, that these companies still are not profitable. But yes, it helps you build big companies, and it eventually improves the living standards of people, right? Because if there wouldn't have been a Zomato or a Flipkart, you wouldn't have ordered so frequently for all the kind of stuff that we consume. So in a way, it helps a country in a way that it gives you access to capital, which is a most important prerequisite whenever you want to build a company. And it helps you grow, it helps you with providing mentorship, and it makes you make right choices in your entire ecosystem, in your entire entrepreneurial journey, right? That is the ethical and the ideal aspect of it. Now coming to the more realistic picture, which is that ultimately, why does someone become a venture capital? The ideal and the ethical aspect of it, that they want to do good for the society. They have been able to make a lot of money, they want to give it back to the society. But a more realistic picture is that they want to multiply their money, right? Or the kind of limited partners that they have in their fund, they want to make money for them as well, right? So the more realistic picture is that they want to make money for their shareholders, right? So how would that happen? So if you look at the more the realistic aspect of it, so their intention is to multiply their money. And what these companies which are typically running on steroids, right? So this venture capital money is kind of a steroid. If you were to building a good muscular body, right? One way is that you keep grinding every day. Other way would be that you start getting in steroids. It will just bulk in your body and make things look very good from the outside, but from the inside it's all hollow, right? So some companies might end up becoming that, as we have seen in the previous cases. Some of the companies, they went on to raise a lot of venture capital. A recent example being AskMeBazaar.com, that recently shut down because the internal processes and systems were not set in a manner that they should have been. But on the flip side of it, there are other companies who have been getting in a lot of funds, and they eventually became profitable, right? Or they are to become profitable in a couple of years. So in a way it's a double-edged, like it can have both aspects of it, right? It has worked well for certain companies, and it has given a lot of returns for these VCs as well. But on the other side, it has also built in these big zombie companies who are not making money, who are burning a lot of venture capital, and they just keep on waiting for the next round of funding to happen, right? So I think there is both aspects to it, and that is how the current reality is.
I'll beg to differ on the first stage. I'll just one thing. I'll beg to differ on one thing. That's it. You just mentioned that entrepreneurs and businessmen are two different people, and venture capitalism in its name says capitalism. So how do we expect an ideal venture capitalist to think about the idea, or maybe it's right, think about the motion sometimes, it's a noble cause, but isn't it their job in their best interest to multiply the money? So I guess the ideal definition of venture capitalism just speaks about multiplying the money. And the however important the notion is for you, is it might not be for the person investing, for the person putting money in your idea. So I guess that is when it comes into picture. So that's my thing. But okay, however, like you explain both the sides of it, and it's like quite an explanation. So I'll give
So
it back
I'll
to you.
just touch on one aspect of it. So if you look at it, a company is like so basically, as in when you pump more money into the company, right, the pie keeps on becoming bigger. So in a way, it's not a zero sum game; it's a positive sum game. So you are making money for yourself, you are making money for the venture capital who's giving you money, and eventually it is also helping the country as well. So if you look at the all the aspects of capitalism, it isn't necessarily bad, right? If the only way to make everyone equal is that everyone becomes poor, right? So what capitalism and venture capital eventually does, and it's actually a good thing to so if you look at the past history of 1 to 2 months, right, you can see a lot of these big companies coming into the picture and becoming unicorns, right? So eventually what these companies also did is that
Fam paper.
they create a lot of jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, like they have their own motives by why venture capital is investing money in a particular country, but eventually on the side note, it does good for the country as well, right? Just to draw a correlation with the railways, so the British introduced the railways for their own benefit, but eventually it helped India as well, right? So it's kind of a similar thing. It does not hamper or
It could be a win-win for all, right?
yes.
So it
At least the ideal aspect of it is that, but
yeah.
then you have exceptions wherein it's just pump and dump. Yeah,
Definitions are just collection of phrases that never make sense together. Yeah. So however, it's quite an explanation. I'll probably not need any more stuff on. I'll had another question on venture capitalism, but apparently though 5 of them have answered themselves through the explanation you gave. Okay, so I'll move on with the next part of my question, and that's my last question probably. This is the thing about entrepreneurship. Okay, we have an idea in place, and we have a thought, and we have a vision. How to process it, like what amount of knowledge, because when you talk about a CEO, he has to think in 5 dimensions, like not just the finance, not just the tech part, not just the operations part, not just the legal part of it. He has to think always, right? So what do you think is the prerequisite of being an entrepreneur? Is there, it's a very insane question. Do you think what amount of knowledge is necessary for a guy to pursue entrepreneurship, and how to gain that knowledge? Is MBA a path to go? Is entrepreneurship a path to go? Is multiple, like failing multiple times, is a path to go? And is just because reading might help, but reading isn't the real aspect of it, right? It doesn't help you on ground. So what do you think is the right way to go about entrepreneurship? Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah. So, what I have experienced from my own, experience of building a couple of companies is that it's something like you learn the art on the job, right? So there is definitely some theory to it, but eventually this is true for any competitive exam. This is true also for entrepreneurship. That eventually you need to go there and do questions, right? And keep solving questions. There is only so much theory to it. You can start off with some basic prerequisites, because there are a couple of these books which gives you a very good perspective of the science behind entrepreneurship. There are a couple of mistakes that you can avoid in your journey. So that's a good starting point once you have all of this knowledge, that what is a step by step process of doing it. But once you have that, the only way of actually doing it is just getting started. And once you start, you'll see multiple failures. You'll face a lot of problems. You will also see situations wherein someone has already told you that this is the right way to do it. You also are convinced that this is how I'll be doing it, but eventually you're not able to execute that, right? So I think entrepreneurship is 100% about execution and 0% about the idea, right? So idea is only a fraction of what people think, right? It's less than 0.1%. So it's all about execution. It's about getting started. Once you have started, and all of this, finance, hiring, and technology, and HR, everything, marketing. So
Everything
all of
falls
that
into place.
falls into place eventually, right? It's like in your journey you'll make a lot of mistakes. So there are a lot of things that you would not know initially, but as and when you keep going, so at a point you would realize that all of this becomes secondary, right? So if let's say you do not know about finance, or you do not know about marketing, that should not stop you from being an entrepreneur. If you look at some of the biggest names in the entire entrepreneurship ecosystem, they haven't even gone to college, right? And then you would see people who have all these big brands in their name, and they still, if and even after that, if they start a company, they would fail, right? So if all of these knowledge would have been the prerequisite to start a company, these guys would have been a sure shot success, and these guys would have been a sure shot failure. But that hasn't been a case, right? I think if you are able to pursue something for continuously without giving up for 3 to 4 years, I think you will definitely end up being somewhere, right? The important aspect of that being that you should keep learning from your mistakes, and you should keep growing. It should not be that you have left everything on the autopilot mode and things are just happening on their own. If you keep learning, growing, learning every day, because every day you'll be facing new challenges, and there is only so much that you can learn upfront that will help you to sail the entire entrepreneurship journey. That never happens, right? You cannot gain so much knowledge ever that you'll never make mistakes. Even some of the biggest names, take an example of this SoftBank CEO Masatoshi Son, right? Despite being such a big name, he was the one who lost one of the biggest. He lost $70 billion in the dot-com crash, right? Having so much experience, investing in so many companies, yet he made a lot of mistakes. So this is true for everyone. True for
I
Bill
guess the
Gates.
ideal movie to explain is this, the Big Short one, right? The
Yeah.
movie Big Short. Ki not everyone the losers are the losers. So
Yes.
yeah, so I guess
So
that's pretty much.
ultimately, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you saying something.
So ultimately, it boils down to learning it while you are on the job, and you keep going on. You keep making mistakes. You keep correcting them, and you keep learning, and that's how everything falls in place. It's just you need to get started and have conviction that yes, you will sail through eventually. That's all that is required.
Sure, that's an explanation. You get into so detailed explanation that I have to cancel out questions at the very end. So yeah, that's pretty much nice. So I'm at the end of my streak of questions. Apparently, we've batted all of them. So I'll be asking you to summarize this entire conversation for a guy who who doesn't have the time to listen to everything we have just spoke about, to how does he start? And he wants to start a business. So, what is the summary of this podcast? If you just can give to somebody.
Okay, so we haven't talked about this in the podcast, but I think even before starting your entrepreneurial journey, you should have that why in place. So there is this book by Simon Sinek, Start with Why, right? So it talks about why do you do what you want to do, right? So this is something that might sound cliche at the start, but eventually when you go on this entrepreneurial journey, you realize that this is very important. So don't do this because this sounds very cool. You would be the next cool guy, uh, you know but do it because you have conviction, right? And also, uh, especially for the college folks, since I started this in college, I am very convinced that everyone who has even slightest inclination towards entrepreneurship, they should definitely try doing it in college. Even if you fail, you will be able to learn a lot of things. That has been the case with me as well, right? But this doesn't hold true when you are in the earning phase of your life, or when you have graduated already and you have started working somewhere. But while in college, you should definitely experiment and do this because this is cool, right? So because that is where you can afford to make a lot of mistakes, learn, have good friend circle, and eventually gain a lot of experience that can help you even if you do not want to become an entrepreneur, right? But
Yeah.
now coming on to the other aspect of it, once you have started earning, do it only if you really want to, you're attached to a problem, or even that is fine. If you want to make big money and you see that this is a good way of doing it, even that is fine. I don't see any problem with that. But you should have a very strong why in place. Why are you actually doing it? So that in the days wherein you are feeling very low, or things are just not working out, you should have at least that conviction that has the why changed, why I started doing it in first place. So that, I think, is the starting point. Have a why in place. Why do you want to do this? And once you have decided that yes, I do want to do this, it's important just to get started and keep doing it. I think it's more about discipline than motivation. Once you have become disciplined that this is my path going forward, right? And then you just go on doing it. And we talked about venture capital, and how this can be helpful for a lot of people. And this is also in a way, the real aspect of it. Some of them are also there just to make a lot of money, which is
So
also fine. There is no denying that. So yeah, these are some of the things we
that's
talked
pretty much
about.
it. So yeah, that's me, and so that's Mr. Divyansh Mathur. So how did you like the podcast? If you liked it at all, because I thought sometimes you feel like, what is he talking about? Does he even know? So yeah.
Yeah. So no, it's not like
So
that.
what?
See, I'll tell you. I, you know, as I mentioned, most important thing is to get started, right? And since you are doing it at an early stage, you have already done 12, 13 podcasts. It's a very good thing, right? So I think if you start off with anything, and if you keep doing it for some point of like a stretched amount of time, you'll eventually get better at it, right? And it's a good thing that you are doing this. I like the entire conversation, and all the best for your future podcasts.
Thanks for
Many
your time.
more.
Thanks a lot for your
Yeah.
time. And if you can please tell the viewers of this, all the 200, 300 viewers, please like this so that I can promote it to somebody else, and YouTuber starts recognizing my work. Yeah.
Sure. So, like, share, subscribe to Kanish. He's doing a great job with his podcast, and hopefully someday he'll have, very big names in this industry as well. So yeah,
So yeah.
he's doing a
So
great job.
I'll
Please
call you
like, share.
again. So after
Sure.
you register yourself in the unicorn startups, I'll publish my podcast with that name. So okay, thanks for your time, sir, and thanks a lot.